We've got some antenna testing by Sandor Dubronner.
Ooh.
We've had him on quite a few times, and he's got another cool little experiment for us. I believe Aber the Ham in one of your live streams mentioned that he wanted to know how the SMA adapters work and what the actual loss was.
Mm-hmm.
So Sandor decided to go in and do some testing and see
And we're so
what he
we're
came
so
up with.
lucky to have him because he has access to like commercial lab grade whatever RF equipment, which I mean that typically costs in the range of like $5,000 to $50,000. I don't know what specific machines he has. Not something you just pick up if you want to play around. And he takes his time to do these tests for us. So he's testing these different adapters and connectors, right? What did we
Yeah, and
find, Blunty?
it's got a little chart here that shows basically, if you use a 45 at 6.5 for the male to female, a 90 is 11.1% loss, and then for the female to female, and then male to female is 12.5%, which all kind of track. And then he said he was interested because when he did the 2x45, the male to female, you see there's quite a large discrepancy there. So for some reason, because when you start stacking these connectors, they seem to get quite a bit worse. And he said he used multiple sets of 45 stacked together, and each one of them came out around this 21% versus only 6.5%, 6.7% for 145. Kind of interesting.
Yeah. So what we see here is that the adapters, the 0 degree, which is like an RPSMA to SMA, which just buy the right connector for your antenna and save yourself the trouble, but it's only essentially a negligible loss, 0.6%. But a 45 degree or a 90 degree, that's a fair amount of loss, I gotta say.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I don't know how. I mean, it's definitely good to test because I think people have said there's been a bit of loss for a while. But yeah, that is it's not a small amount. So it may be quite a bit of a factor, especially if you're putting them on patches to try to push ranges and stuff. So definitely something to consider. Also, I think some patches come with them, so they're like tuned with the SMA, right? I think it depends on the patch.
I mean, if the antenna has a 90 degree built in, I wouldn't assume that you're not taking this loss. I don't know, but I wouldn't assume. I mean, the loss may be simply because you're bending the wire and high frequency RF signals don't like to change direction.
Right.
I just don't know. I'd be I mean, that would also be interesting to know, but
it's also interesting because, like you're saying, you would think 245s would be easier than a 90, instead of harder, because a 90 is just kind of a hard cut.
Yeah,
right?
it's not as not as sharp a turn.
But it seems like there's something else going on there. There's some loss between the connections and something about, I guess, the way, I don't know enough about RF, but maybe the way it changes the actual signal, something.
Yeah.
So.
Robert Rempel says that Alex Grieve of Video Aerial Systems did this test years ago. Well, if it's a good thing that there's reasons for more than one person to do the same test to see if they get the same results, because my recollection is that Alex Grieve concluded the loss was negligible, like less than half a dB. I don't remember his results matching this. So it doesn't mean he's wrong and Sandor is right, but just saying, oh, that test has been done, so we never need to think about it again, is not a good one. Robert Rempel says that contact points are where you lose signal, which may explain why 245s is worse than 190.
Sandor says it's something to do with capacity, but I'm not sure what capacity means in the case of RF.
Capacitance?
I don't know. Maybe it's
a translation.
He's just saying. Yeah. He says if you look at the Smith chart, we can see that 2x45 is adding so much capacity that the results jump so bad. So maybe it is capacitance.
I think he's saying capacitance, but I don't want to presume. So the takeaway is, if possible, use no angled adapters. If you need an angled adapter, try to use a 45. Don't use 2x45, use 190. And RPSMA or SMA makes no difference. It's just the bends that slow you down. Well, I don't know what to say about that, because by God, I can't mount my antennas on my goggles without a 90 or a 45.
Yeah, I think in most cases you just kind of have to accept that loss because you got to point that patch away. But it may add, I don't know, it may add some reason. If it's really 10%, even on average, right? That seems like enough of a reason to mount connectors in different positions so that you can get those connectors,
Yeah.
facing for patches and stuff.
I wish he'd got this in dB. He's giving it in percent so that normal people can understand it. If it was dB, then you could assess, like, how does it compare to, like, if you've got a 5 dB patch, but you're losing 2 dB to your connector or whatever.
Right.
Wouldn't you be better just bending the wire instead of using a connector? Yeah, presumably having a straight piece of coax that you bend would be better than having a sharp bend in an adapter. So
I guess maybe that should be tested too, right? I don't know. Maybe
so.
that might have been tested, but yeah, if you do a 90-degree bend in like one of those matchsticks or something that is bendable, I wonder how much difference that is to adding a piece like that with the connection and the internal points and there's a lot more to a SMA connector.
Yeah.